I'm Fiona Fernandez and I'm delighted to welcome you to Season 2 of Walk with Midday. It's the newspaper's very own all-access ticket for our readers to some of the coolest places and some of the best kept secrets about Bombay's heritage and its culture. Now, like the rest of the world, we too had to adapt and tweak our formats to the new normal. So this time around, we're going to be taking you on a walk in this beautiful part of South Mumbai, which is Ballard Estate, while you explore this walk from your own devices and screens. So come along, let's enjoy the ride. Before we proceed on our walk, I'd like to give you all a little bit of a background about Ballard Estate. Back in the late 1800s, when Bombay's rulers changed hands from the British East India Company to the British Crown, its shipping industry flourished manifold. The older docks, namely Princess Docks and Victoria Docks, were not able to manage the traffic. That's when it was decided that Alexandra Dock would also have to be built. In 1905, the Prince of Wales laid the foundation of Alexandra Dock. At that time, John A. Ballard, who was the first chairman of the Bombay Port Trust, was in a fix. He was not sure that what could be done with all the soil that had been excavated from the seabed as a result of a construction of this dock. And that's how the whole idea behind Ballard Estate came to being. He appointed George Wittet, who was at that time the consulting architect of the Bombay Presidency, to design this entire estate. So basically what we're standing on is reclaimed land that was used after the materials had flattened this marshy part of the city. Our first halt is the Port Trust offices right behind me. In 1873, the Bombay Port Trust was set up with the intent to monitor the shipping industry in the heart of the British Crown. You will see one of the most magnificent buildings designed by George Wittet, who was the consultant architect of the Bombay Presidency and was responsible for the design of this entire estate. This entire estate measures 22 acres of land, and the original 43 blocks that you see around here are of almost uniform length and have a homogeneous style. They are designed in the European Renaissance architectural style, and there's also a little bit of the Edwardian and the neoclassical that you will spot in certain elements and details along its facade. We're standing in front of the Royal Bombay Seamen's Club, also known as the Prince of Wales Seamen's Club. This building is actually 100 years old and is a Grade 2A heritage building. Now, once upon a time, this place didn't allow permission for Indian sailors to reside. Right now, of course, all of that has changed. It's also the only seamen's club that allows women as well as families to board. Back in the day, when the shipping industry in Bombay was booming, this place was the favored residence for sailors from passenger ships as well as container ships. In fact, it was so popular that it also had a ballroom at one given point in time. There's a cafeteria right now over here, and the place continues to be used by sailors over the years. Our next halt is the new Customs House. This grand and magnificent structure also came up around the same time and was designed by the same gentleman, that's George Wittet. If you look closely at the facade, you'll notice these grand windows, you'll notice the detailed facades, and like most of the structures in this estate, they were made of sandstone. I'd also like to share a little bit about George Wittet. While he was the chief consultant architect of the Bombay Presidency and was responsible for the design of this entire estate, Wittet is also credited to have designed the General Post Office, which is to my right, and to my left, the Prince of Wales Museum, which is today's Chhatrapati Shivaji Vastru Sangrahalaya, as well as the Gateway of India. So this building is also made of sandstone, and you can see the stamp of George Wittet's design quite evident. Because of where it was located, the idea was to ensure that its occupants, its residents, its people who were working in offices didn't lose out on the stiff, nice, pleasant sea breeze that would come in from that side, which is not too far away, the harbour. So huge, large windows, high ceilings, though as you can see, pretty much uniform in terms of the height. Most buildings don't go beyond 2 levels above the ground floor. You will see that great thought and detail has been given even to things like the lobby, for example. So yeah, all credit to Wittet and his boss, that is John Ballard, who was the first chairman of the Bombay Port Trust. It's impossible to not find any of these lanes and roads that don't have trees at the side, and that was sort of a statutory requirement at that point. This man Wittet is also somebody who understood Bombay very well. So he understood the city and he understood what materials also work best for structures here. When he started work on this, which is from 1908 to 1914, sandstone seemed to be the preferred material. So you have Malad sandstone, you have sandstone from Kurla, and then you have sandstone from Port Bunder. When he was overseeing the design of this estate, it's highly possible that he was also designing the Prince of Wales Museum and the Gateway around the same time. Imagine the enormity of his role, right? And imagine the impact that he has left in the city, which I feel hasn't really given him his due. Right down to the point where his grave can't be located at Sivri Cemetery. It's just a record in the books over there. And now we come to the other iconic landmark, a culinary landmark in Bombay, which is Britannia Company restaurant. And I'd like to invite Midday's editor, Tinaz Nushian, to tell us a little bit about it. You actually had the good fortune of meeting the legendary, iconic Mr. Kohinoor.
The thing about Britannia is that everyone talks about the fact that half of its charm is, by its rundown character and exposed wiring and all of that, but it's housed in this historic structure, and it was opened in 1923, so obviously the structure sort of predates the restaurant, and again designed by Wittet. The thing that sort of separates Britannia from the other cafes is that it's not the typical Irani cafe which would serve bun maska chai and maybe a couple of savories like keema pao, whatever, right? It was a full-fledged restaurant, and interestingly, it didn't always serve Iranian food. So it's when its owner, Baman Kohinoor, who of course is no more, when his father sort of used to run it, they would serve continental food, typical bland continental food. And then when Mr. Kohinoor and his wife Bacha, when they went back to Iran in the late, I think, 1970s, and lived there for a couple of years and then came back in the early 1980s. That is when they brought back with them, sort of Persian recipes and decided why not try to introduce some of those on the menu. And of course, Zeresh Pulao was, which is their berry pulao, the iconic dish, was introduced, and it was Bacha's secret recipe, and Mr. Kohinoor would never tell you what went into making it. And I think what makes Britannia and all of the other Irani cafes what they were and are, were their owners, and they were just full of stories all the time, and that kind of added to their charm. I think Mr. Kohinoor was representative of that, because I think everyone came here enough for the food as much as for his stories, and he was a romantic at heart, and he'd quote poetry, and you didn't know where reality ended and legend began when he started to speak. When he passed away, of course, there was a whole outpouring of grief, right? And it was almost like celebrity had gone, and we had international newspapers writing about an Irani cafe owner, and why is it that his going away made so much of a difference to the city and to people who had encountered him? I mean, the cafe is still here, but I think that these establishments are the owners, and I don't know now what Britannia really is without Mr. Kohinoor, and what is Kayani & Company without Aflatun Shokri, and what would Paradise have been without Jimmy and Meru Kat Khoda? I don't know. They're just so intrinsically linked, the man and the establishment.
We've arrived at the heart of the Ballard Estate precinct. Behind me is a very important landmark called the Port Trust War Memorial. Very few people might be aware of this, but it is actually one of the last surviving reminders of Bombay and India's contribution to World War I. As you walk around this memorial, you'll spot very interesting details and facts about this contribution made by Bombay and India. Right behind me is the Bombay Port Trust crest. And on the other side, you will spot details like 1,87,000 troops were actually sent to fight the war on behalf of the British Crown, or that 20 million tons of supplies were sent right from here. The next halt is intrinsically connected to this place, which is the Ballard Bunder Gate. We've arrived at the Ballard Bunder Gate. This was commissioned in 1920, and in fact, it has been perceived as the actual gateway of India simply because of the amount of traffic that it catered to. So you would have passenger ships that would dock right here, and all these passengers would cross this gate and enter into Bombay and possibly travel to other parts of the country. Passengers who would dock at the Ballard Bunder Gate would prefer to live at Regent Hotel, which is once upon a time the space that you see right behind me, which is the Raksha House. Now, most of the passengers would have also had to board a train to another part of India, and that's when they would have to take the train from the now gone Ballard Pier railway station. Hamilton Studio was the official photographer of the Bombay Port Trust. It was established in 1928, so in fact it's over 90 years old. Urban legend has it that Zeenat Aman's mother had come here with her daughter's portfolio to be made. But instead, when the owner at that time, Mr. Ranjit Madhavji, had seen her pictures, he was wowed by her beauty, and he immediately suggested that Zeenat Aman's mother suggest her to be as a model or an actress. And the rest, as they say, is history. We've arrived at the final halt of this walk around this beautiful part of South Mumbai, which is Ballard Estate. Behind me is the Grand Hotel, again designed by George Wittet. It's a fine example of a corner building. The rooms inside are believed to be quite lavish, and the place boasts of excellent service. In fact, when passengers would board at the Ballard Bunder Gate, they would prefer to stay here, especially those who could afford to do it. And with that, it's a wrap. I hope you enjoyed this walk as much as I did while piecing it together. I'd like to leave you with an interesting thought that I came across while reading a book written by Rahul Mehrotra and late Sharda Dwivedi. In Ballard Estate's pedestrian-friendly plan, almost 25% of the area was allotted for pavements as compared to 12.5% in Nariman Point. That's quite an interesting fact if you take into mind how much the city has changed and how much we think about pedestrians. Thank you.
Subscribe to Midday India. Get direct notifications on all our videos by clicking on the bell icon.